Hello, I'm Jude Scott, and today we're going to paint some sweet peas, the last of the sweet peas from my garden. I've never grown them before, but they're beautiful flowers, very delicate, soft colours, and I love the way that the stems, the green from the stems, travels up into the blooms, and the colours from the blooms merge down into the stems. They're really lovely to paint. So I hope you like to paint along with me today and see how you go. I've drawn up my flowers. Sometimes if you've only got one flower, you can position it in all sorts of different ways so that it looks like you've got a whole bunch. I did have several, but they weren't terribly good specimens, but that didn't matter. Mainly it's the shape. So I mixed up great puddles of paint. I've got a green mixed up, I've got a warm and cool blue mixed up, and I've also got aureole and yellow. Mix up plenty of paint because you will need plenty of paint. You can't paint a painting without paint. So don't mix up a tiny little amount. You'll regret it because it just won't work as well as having lots of lovely luscious paint mixed up ready to go when you need it. So I've used a lot of water here for this. This is actually one of the little peas, one of the seed pods that's formed on the end. And I've just dropped in paint at random points and I've let it merge on the paper. You can get wonderful random effects by doing that. So try it and see how you go. If you're not confident doing a whole painting, just try some little exercises as you paint along with me and see how you go. You might just want to paint some stems, you might just want to paint the seed pods, or you might want to paint the whole flower. So I've mixed up really strong paint. And then I drag that down the little pea with some yellow, and I can also use some water to drag that down. So you need it fairly strong, stronger than you want the finished painting, to be, because the paint will dry about 10%, sometimes a little bit more, lighter than what you have put it on when it's fresh. The more water you use, the paler the paint will be when it dries. So if you can get it down the right tones in the first attempt, it'll always look a lot fresher than painting that has been gone over and over. So just think of that. Keep it fresh, go in really strong. If it's too strong, you can always blot it off with paper, let it dry 100% and start again. So it's always exciting to see the paint just flow down the stems of these blossoms. They have such wonderful shapes. Here I've just got an ordinary pencil. It's an HB. It's quite hard. And I've put a blob of paint at the end here. And I'm using just the tip of the lead pencil to sort of pick up a little bit of excess moisture and drag that pigment out. It's not the lead pencil that's making those marks, it's a tiny bit of paint that's on the pencil. So that is a way that if you're not confident at drawing really fine lines with your brush, try dragging out some paint with a pencil. You get really beautiful fine lines with that. So I've run out of paint, so I'll just add in a little bit more there with my brush. Okay, that's about done, I think. So some more really strong dark green. And just watching that go back up the stem. And then into the base of that, if I add some water, it will give me a lovely pale green at the base of the stem. Now for the flower, I've mixed up some cobalt blue, and I've mixed up some permanent rose, and I've mixed up some quinacridone red to get this lovely soft mauvey colour for the flowers. I've also got another puddle of dark paint there that you can see, which has more permanent rose than it has cobalt in it. So this is the kind of the little pea-shaped section in the middle of the sweet pea, and that sort of reflects the colour, and I love how it washes back up into the other petals. So I've put down really dark paint, and before you go, wow, that is really dark, I need to add a lot of water to that to make it work. So at this stage, if your yellows go into the purple, don't worry. Don't try and blot it out. Just have the courage to sort of let the paint do its own thing and make its own mark. And you'll get some lovely happy accidents forming there. You can always add a bit more dark to it. And that's my warm puddle of dark mauvey blue. Don't push the paint around on the paper too much. Just let it bleed and do its own thing. So more dark marks for these petals. There I'm putting a little bit of the warmer colour in. And then to that I'm just adding water, and get that, drag it in from the edges. And you can see how it's forming wonderful marks on the paper all by itself. You don't have to work too hard, just try and get it to do its own thing. There I've just added some water to push that pigment even more around on the surface of the paper. And I'm adding a little bit of quinacridone red now to that mauvey blue to make it a bit warmer, because it's really important that you have warm and cool tones within the flower, and light and dark. Don't forget that. It's really important. And it'll just add a bit of magic to your work if you can combine warm and cool, light and dark. Again, that's the yellowy centre of the sweet pea. And now I'll get the green for the stems and the little spiky areas there that come down from the flower. And I've dropped a bit of water into there, so it's gone up into the flower and it's pushed the green up into the yellow, which I love that look. Now it's really good to have some soft edges on your flower. So you can see on the flower on the left hand side I've softened that edge, and I'm not bothered that it's bloomed right out into the background. I can always rub that off with a damp brush when I've finished, or you can just choose to like it. You don't have to sort of rush into making any decisions at this stage. Those sorts of things you can do right at the end and when it's completely dry. So the petals have got some wonderful frilled edges and turnbacks, which make them really interesting and probably quite difficult to paint. They're more challenging than a petal that is very straight. So it's important to maybe practice your drawing. So if you can draw a sweet pea, you'll be able to paint it, but it's a lot more difficult to paint well if you can't draw the flower. So just keep practicing and it will happen for you. Now, as I said earlier, this is not a botanical drawing, so I can let the paints merge on the paper, I can let colours flow into one another, whereas I couldn't do that with a botanical drawing. So you have a lot more room for expression when you're painting flowers that aren't botanical. So just picking up some green there to put the bottom of the flower bud in. And just putting a little bit more yellow at the base there to push that green pigment up a little bit. And again, just using a damp brush, and don't use a wet brush, please. Make sure it's just damp, because if you put a lot of water in there, you'll have paint flowing everywhere, which might work really well for you, but I just wanted to soften the edge of that flower a little bit. The stem here is still quite damp, so the paint is moving along that stem for me. While I've got green on the brush, I'll just finish off a little bit more detail on this one. It was too wet before. I think that's the issue with watercolour. It's always having the right amount of pigment with the right amount of water at just the right time. Not always easy, but this petal has dried enough now that I can go over the top and just put a little bit more definition in with another petal. So it's taken it from being one-dimensional to three-dimensional. And now it looks like it's got a couple of layers of petals, which is what I wanted, so that's worked well. There's a lot of water sitting at the edge of that petal, so I've got my trusty calligraphy brush. So if I touch the tip of the brush just to the top of that bubble of water, it will suck out the excess water, but it won't take the pigment with it. So that's a little tip that you can try at home, see how you go. So I've continued on here and I've done some more detail, added a few more flowers, some leaves. I'm just going to put a bit more depth there so that you have the feeling of a little bit of perspective. Some petals coming forward and some receding. And it's no different to painting a landscape. If you want to make something recede, you make it a little bit darker. And if you want to make it come forward, you make it a little bit warmer. Sorry, you make it cooler to make it recede and make it warmer to come forward. But also if you've got, say, one stem crossing over another one, always make the distant stem, the one that's behind, make it a little bit darker than the stem that's in front. And straight away you'll find that it'll go back into the picture plane. So I'll just touch a bit of green there and straight away that looks like flower in front on the stem is in front of the darker stem. So I've drawn in a few more flowers. It was looking a little bit lonely there, just with some aureole and yellow, and now I'll just add some green. So the bases of the sweet pea buds are quite dark and they lighten up as they get toward the flowers. So if you find a subject that you really like, just study it and take care to sort of observe where it's darker and where it's lighter, and what is it that makes this flower look like a sweet pea and make it stand out from other flowers. What's the difference? So if you can really look at the differences in the way the flowers are formed and the petals, you'll be able to draw and paint them with no problems. Now with this stem, I picked up my wrong pencil. I picked up a water-soluble graphite, and I've got a grey stem really instead of a green one, but that's okay, I can work with that and go over it with the green. If you don't like your pencil marks showing when you've finished a painting, when it's 100% dry, and if you've had a very wet surface that you've been painting on, maybe even leave it a day, and then you can just rub the pencil off with a kneadable eraser. They're one of the soft putty erasers, but if that won't come off, then try a harder eraser and you can just erase off over the dry paint and it won't affect the painting at all. Yes, that got a little bit wide, that one. It was getting away from me. So just a touch of dark behind that foreground stem, and it's looking like it's more three-dimensional. So when you're painting your own floral works, don't try and copy anybody else's style. Just keep painting and your style will evolve. It's like your handwriting. You don't naturally write like anybody else. So if you've got your own handwriting style, just improve on your technique. And the same with painting. Whatever your style is, stick to it. Don't try and change it. It will change, and I think your painting style is like your handwriting. If your handwriting evolves as you mature, the more writing you do, the better your handwriting becomes. And really and truly, painting is no different. And most artists, if you ask them, they can't paint today like they did 5 or 10 years ago. Their painting style has changed. So this little flower here was almost white. It was just a lovely soft creamy colour. So I'm just making it a really soft colour. Just softening the edges of that dark outer petal surface. I don't want that to stand out too much, otherwise it will look like it's been outlined, and that won't work for me. So with the leaves here, if I drop in some water, just put water onto that petal that is nearly dried, the leaf that's nearly dried, it will flow along the surface of the paper and it will push the pigment around because it's not perfectly dry. That's what people sometimes call a cauliflower. And they look great in leaves, they look great in florals. Not so hot if you're painting beautiful sky, but in leaves and anywhere where you want some texture, visual texture, they look great. So here I'm just adding some more dark to get that petal to go back behind the petal in front of it and add a bit more of a three-dimensional look. And I'm just going to sort of pick out a couple of petals here. The only way that you can do that is to have light and dark. It's a little bit like painting a white rose. You've got to have various tones of white. So you can only move 4 ways with colour, I've worked out. You can only go lighter or darker, warmer or cooler. So if you think, I'm not quite sure what to put here, think, do I need a warmer tone of that colour or a cooler tone? Or do I need a darker tone, which might just mean less water when you pick up the pigment on your brush. So when you get to this stage, you can just sort of look at the work, go back and forth. Some areas might need making darker, some areas might need a little bit of cool paint added. And it's also good to sometimes, when you finish your work and you're not sure, prop it up against the wall, somewhere where you pass by, in the kitchen or dining room where you can see your work and think, what's wrong with it? Maybe there's nothing wrong. Maybe you can think, how can I improve it? And it'll come to you. You'll be able to go, oh gosh, if there's a big mistake, it will really stand out. The other thing you might like to do is, if you can't work out what is wrong with your painting, if you think there's something wrong, take a photo of it in black and white. So adjust your camera setting to take a sepia coloured photo or a black and white, or after you've taken the photo, change it to black and white. And you'll find that if your tones are incorrect, the painting, it won't look good in black and white. But if your tones are correct, the painting will look good. So then maybe it's a design issue. Maybe you need to change your composition or the design format. But it will always, if it looks good in black and white, you're fine. Your tones are correct. So I think I'll add a couple more leaves down here. So again, just putting in the aureole and yellow first, and then I'll float the green in over the top of that. So the colours I've used today are all Holbein paints, which I love because they are very, very strong pigments. They're the finest ground watercolours on the market, and they don't contain any animal products. And if you want to have the real soft wet in wet look, you can add ox gall to your paints because there are no animal products in Holbein paints. If you add ox gall, it will really bloom all over wet paper, so which it'll go better than other paper paints if you add ox gall, because most other paints already have the ox gall added, so the effect won't be as dramatic. Another reason that I love Holbein is the fact that their pigments will lift off very easily. So even the quite dark indigos, or if you're mixing up ultramarine, if you've got a stiff-edged brush, and I use a 1-inch flat brush with nylon bristles that I've had for about 20 years, that lifts off the pigment beautifully. And a lot of other paints you can't lift off. Once you've put it down, it can be very difficult to lift off, especially if you've used a hot press paper. And if you get to a stage when you're painting and you think, I just don't know what to do, where to go, and you start getting frustrated with it, it's time to stop, go and have a cup of tea, have a coffee, have a walk, and come back to it, and you'll go, oh gosh, why didn't I think to do this or that? And it will all seem so much clearer. Don't ever feel you have to finish a painting all in one go. That often doesn't work at all well for anybody. So be kind to yourself. See, I'm now lifting off the stems. It's probably still a little bit wet, so it's actually sinking back over the surface of the paper where I've tried to lift off. I can fix that a little bit later. Yeah, so to list the colours again, I've used cobalt blue, I've used ultramarine, and I've used aureolin yellow for the greens, mixed with both of the blues, and then with the soft mauvey colours that I've used for the petals of the flowers, that was cobalt blue, and it's cobalt blue 290. I really love that colour. It just makes the most beautiful shades. So that's the one that I prefer. There is another cobalt, but it's a lot more intense, and I like the 290. It's just a little bit softer, and it seems to suit my way of working. And to make the cooler colour, I've mixed some some rose madder with the ultramarine and cobalt blue, and then I've mixed quinacridone red with cobalt blue to make the warmer tones for the petals. So here we are with the finished painting. Have a look and see if you like that, and hope you can do something similar. I'm going to do a close-up in a moment of the petals and the effects, especially so that you can see how it's got the cauliflowers, where the petals have pushed, the pigment's been pushed around by just dropping in pure water. And you can see the light and dark, warm and cool colours. Thanks for watching. Happy painting. Please leave a like and click subscribe for more free videos.